Welcome! My bad. Welcome to my workshop. Now, this week's video feels like a bit of a come down after last week's efforts. Those of you that have seen the last video will remember that I built these two flags for James's man cave challenge that he set. And in this week's video, I'm just going to be building a couple of stools. At the moment, I've been using this old garden chair in the workshop, but it's a bit big and bulky, and I want to make a couple of stools. So if I get any visitors, they got someone to sit as well as me. Right, for this project I'm just going to be using some scrap 4x2 treated timber. One of my neighbours has just got a new shed and she used this wood when she was doing the concrete base. So at the moment it's covered in concrete, which I've got to try and clean off a little bit. And it's also been left out in her garden for the last few weeks, so it's soaking wet as well. I did bring it into the workshop about a week ago to try and dry it out a little bit. It's still a little bit wet, but should be okay to use for a couple of stools. So if you want to see how I built the stools, then stick around. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, then hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. So cheers for watching. Right guys, so to start with, this video begins pretty much like any other video by marking and cutting the pieces down to more manageable sizes. Then I put them all through the thicknesser just to basically clean the timber up a little bit, because it was looking really dirty and this was easier than trying to sand it by hand. Next I needed to cut the pieces in half to make the legs. For the stretchers, I just grabbed another couple of pieces of 4x2. First trimmed the corners off, or the rounded edges, and then basically I needed to cut them down lengthwise to the right thickness, which I done in 2 passes on a table saw. So to cut the correct angles on the legs, I adjusted the blade 5 degrees and the mitre gauge 5 degrees to the left, and then I ran all the legs through and cut one end. Then once all the legs have been cut one end, I then rotated each leg 180 degrees and flipped it forward quarter of a turn. Then, using a stop block clamped to the left hand side of my bench to give me nice consistent lengths, I then ran all the legs through the table saw again and cut them to their final length. So for the top of the stools, I'm going to be using this old headboard that came off my daughter's bed. It's got some black plasticky type material and some lovely thick foam. So I'm going to strip this down and use that. Once the material was taken off, I then needed to trim the edges off where the staples were on both sides. And once it was trimmed, I could then start cutting the tops down to their final sizes. So to cut the foam, I'm just using an old pair of scissors, and I'm cutting it the same size as the base of the stool. For the fabric, I'm just leaving it about 3-4 inches on all sides. To stick the foam on, I'm just using some spray adhesive. This stuff is really sticky and works well. Then it's just a case of stapling the material one side and then pulling it as tight as I can, trying to get rid of all the creases, and then stapling it all the way along. Now, I'm not an upholsterer, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, so I'm just trying to get it as tight and as wrinkle free as I can, and then simply driving in a load of staples. Now, the sides were quite easy to do, but the corners, on the other hand, they were a complete nightmare. And after a lot of faffing about, I finally managed to find a way of doing it where I don't think it looked too bad. It's a long way from a professional job, but like I say, I ain't got a clue what I'm doing when it comes to upholstery, so I'm kind of just making it up as I go along. I will be putting some 3mm backing board on the underside of the base just to cover up the edges of the material and all the staples. So once the bases were done and covered, it was time to make the stretchers. And to do this, I just angled the blade 5 degrees to the left and cut one end on all the stretchers, and then once I'd done that I could mark out the length I needed and then adjust the miter saw 5 degrees the opposite way and then cut them down to length. So the last thing I needed to do just before I could start assembling the stools was to use my homemade router table to put a round over on all the legs. So for those of you that maybe haven't seen the video on how I built this router table, you might want to go and look at that video. Now it's time to start assembling the stool. I've put pocket holes on the stretchers, 2 at either end and then 2 on the top side, and that will secure the top to the base. And you'll have noticed that I've put a piece of 12mm ply underneath the stretcher while I'm attaching it, and this will give me a nice reveal. Then it was just a case of putting it all together using the pocket hole screws. Most of it went without any problems until I came to kind of do the bits in the middle. Due to lack of space, I did have a few problems, but after a lot of faffing about, I came up with a way to get the screws in, so it was all good in the end. And I do plan on buying myself a right-angled drill adapter to make tasks like this in the future a lot more easier. Then the last thing to do was to screw down the top to the base using the pocket holes. And the observant people out there will realise that I haven't actually put any stretchers on the lower part of the legs. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, I didn't process enough wood when I was doing the stretchers, and 2, I couldn't be bothered. So now the last thing to do is to get rid of this monstrosity from the workshop. Right guys, that's another video done. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it weren't the most exciting video in the world, but it's something that I needed to do in the workshop, and once again I've managed to use scraps of wood and whatever that would have been thrown away, so that's good in my book. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks to all my regular subscribers. I appreciate you following me along on this journey of trying to sort the workshop out and making stuff out of other people's rubbish, or whatever you want to call it. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, then please think about hitting that subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll be notified of all my future uploads. So that's it from me. I will see you in the next video guys. Cheers for watching.